icons create inspiration. So the idea is to generate inspiration because they are not merely icons.
Namaste. My name is Sagar. I am based in London, in the UK. I am a history student and taking an interest in political and social issues that impact Indian history and have done for the last 200-300 years. But today we are here for a chat with Guru Prakash Paswan. Guru he's an alumnus of the National Law Institute University in Bhopal and the Indian Law Institute in New Delhi, an assistant professor of law at Patna University, and has submitted his doctoral thesis. He's an advisor of the Dalit India Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and he has previously been part of the steering committee for the Australia-India Youth Dialogue, which is a preeminent track-to-leader dialogue between the two nations. He has completed the International Visitor Leadership Program organized and run by the US Department of State. But more importantly, we are here today to talk about his book, The Makers of Modern Dalit History. The book is a ringside view of the early years, breakout period, and the illustrative contributions of various Dalit personalities in impacting the imagination of their chosen fields that have eventually led to the making of Dalit history. Based on original research on historical and contemporary figures such as B.R. Ambedkar, Babu Jagjivan Ram, Gurram Jashuva, K.R. Narayanan, Soyarabai, Rani Jhalkaribai, and many others, makers of modern Dalit history, will be a significant addition to the Dalit discourse. Definitive volume on some of the foremost Dalit thinkers, both past and present, promises to initiate a much-needed conversation around Dalit identity, history, and politics. As part of this platform, the Engage plans to present to its viewers analysis of several socio-political and cultural issues in the form of short videos. The Engage derives its inspiration from the urge to develop a holistic outlook on contemporary societal and political challenges. Namaste, how are you?
Namaste, I'm good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I hear that your book has had very good reception.
Yes, so Makers of Modern Dalit History, me and a very dear friend of mine, Sudarshan Ramabadran. The book came out in the midst of the pandemic. 2021, it was first virtually released, and then we had a physical event in the month of August last year.
Right.
And yes, thankfully, in the world of academia, especially in the world of the social justice literature, the book is gradually making an impact, I believe.
Okay, brilliant. To begin with, I was quite fascinated with what inspired you, or what led you to write this book, because a lot of people have written on Dalit history, and especially post-independence, there's been a lot of uptake in academia about the history of Dalit movements, especially since Ambedkar ji has sort of written a lot during his lifetime and after that there's been a lot of uptake. And so what has inspired you personally to connect with this book and the importance of it?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And so we initially started writing essays commemorating the icons from the marginalized communities. Our first essay was on Babasaheb Ambedkar on 14th of April. It came out in a national newspaper. And the reception to that article was really amazing. In a sense, we mentioned about lesser known aspect of Babasaheb Ambedkar. In a way, you see, the literature on Babasaheb Ambedkar, unfortunately, it focuses on only one aspect of his personality. And the present generation, we only know him as a leader of the depressed classes, as someone who spoke about the issues, concerns of the depressed classes. Fine, that is undoubtedly a truth, but also his contribution as an economist, his contribution as a foreign policy visionary, his contribution as an anthropologist, his foresight on multiple such issues. A person of his academic background, a very rich academic background, who had very nuanced perspective on multiple issues. But unfortunately, if we do not sort of speak about them, if we do not expose them to our present generation, we are doing a great amount of disservice to his soul, to his legacy. So I think that is something which is really important. So once we got some amazing feedback on those essays. We started writing on other icons who came from disadvantaged communities, because you see, we need to understand one thing, that the scholarship post independence, it unfortunately was subsumed by one idea, one ideology, one institution. It did not percolate. So the actual democratization of the discourse, you see, when we say the democratization of the discourse, when there are masses, when there are icons who are acknowledged, when there are icons who are studied, it did not happen, because historians and the academicians who were there in the post independence period, their only priority, their only focus was to give the credit of independence to one institution, to one family, to one individual. You can give, but at the same time, you must acknowledge that there were multiple streams on independence, multiple individuals, organizations. There are so many things to speak about independence movement, and we are so happy back here that through Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, 75 years of Indian independence, there are many seminars, academic conferences, publications that are being encouraged to acknowledge these unsung icons, unsung men and women from the marginalized communities. So, in a sense, that was our idea behind the conception of this book, to identify icons from across the length and breadth of our country, from north, from south. We have Ayangali, for instance, from Kerala. We have a Dakshini Velayudan, who was the first Dalit woman in the Constituent Assembly. We have a Narayan Guru, let's say, from Kerala. We have Gurram Jashuva from Andhra Pradesh. We have a Jhalkaribai from Madhya Pradesh. So how do we sort of identify these icons and start working on them? It is just a drop in the ocean, but I think it has started. And through Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, there is an institutional effort supported by the government to encourage more such scholarship. So I think it is a very good time back here to sort of study these unknown aspects and the unsung heroes from across the communities, across the length and breadth of our country.
Right. Brilliant. And just to give us a little bit more about a couple of the names you've just mentioned, are they all within the realm of politics, or do they span across the various streams and various categories of society?
No, so not necessarily in politics, but freedom fighters, for instance.
Right.
Say, Udham Singh from Punjab. Udham Singh, he made a supreme sacrifice, and back he was a kid when Jallianwala Bagh massacre happened, and the sort of impact it had on his psychology, that he travels through Europe, goes to UK just for that one revenge.
Yeah.
Jhalkaribai, for that matter, Dakshini Velayudan, for that matter. There are so many of them from across, not necessarily in politics, not necessarily in social movement, but women, for instance. You see, Savitribai Phule. Savitribai Phule was an educationist.
Yeah.
He has got nothing to do with politics. So we also, there is a belief that she was the first lady academician. She was the first lady teacher of India. In a sense, in the academic construct of the things, we say that she was the first Mahila Shikshika of our country. So I think so many aspects, so many creative people with creative contributions. For instance, Gurram Jashuva, he was a poet. So he ignited emotions through the medium of his poetry, through the medium of his essays. Babu Jagjivan Ram, although he is in politics, he was a Congress mainstream politician, but his contribution in the 1971 war. So the idea was to sort of collate, organize, identify these icons, their contributions, and sort of an attempt to mainstream them. Because
Right.
unfortunately, like I said, that all the effort, all the energy of our academic, they went to promote one family, one institution, one idea, one ideology. And that is untrue. There are multiple streams, and we will continue to speak about them.
Mhm. Brilliant. Well, that leads me to quite nicely to come on to the fact that what is the importance of having Dalit icons in modern India, and especially with over the course of the last 20 to 30 years since the country's opened up and we've been open to interaction with the world. What is the importance of icons as such that you've mentioned in the larger society in India?
That is a very interesting question. What is the importance of icons? You see, icons create inspiration. Today, as someone from the Dalit community, I see the statue of Baba Saheb Ambedkar across the country with a constitution in his hand and another hand the finger pointing towards the future. You see, there is a future, there will be justice, there will be equality. Although when the constitution was made, Baba Sahib Ambedkar said that on 26th of January 1950, as a nation, we are going to enter into a life of contradictions. We will have equality in politics with the principle of one man, one vote, but we will have gross inequality in our social life and our economic life. So the point is, whenever today the Honorable Prime Minister goes to West Bengal, he speaks about Boro Mai, Mari Mai. Today, Raja Suhel Dev in eastern Uttar Pradesh, in parts of Bahraich. So the idea is to generate inspiration because they are not merely icons. You have to understand that from our imagination, from our perspective, they are our Kul Devta as well.
Okay.
So let's say there is a Ambedkar Jayanti,
Right.
there is an Ambedkar Punyatithi. So
Mhm.
these are occasions on which primarily Dalit Samaj people come across together.
Mm.
They talk about issues, they talk about perspective, they talk about the challenges that is still being faced by the community at large across the country. There are multiple challenges,
Mhm.
Dalit related issues, the problems arising out of our social structure is a truth, it is a reality, no one can deny that. But is it a political problem? No. It is a historical problem, it is a social problem, and time and again, various social reformers have come. That is why it is important that these icons who create inspiration, I can give you 100 such icons.
Mm.
Our culture is civilizationally so diverse, is so rich that in every state I can give you 100 such icons from across the communities, but especially from the marginalized communities, because the marginalized communities historically have been excluded. They were away from the powers, from the structures of education, structures of power, and that is the reason that these icons in their imagination play a very important role to come together and to have a future that is more meaningful, purposeful, and equal in multiple ways.
Okay. Moving on now, just if you could just elaborate a little bit more about how Dalits in politics and Dalit representation in politics connects with ideas such as um, political representation, tokenism, and such. So how does that transpire within larger landscape of politics?
You know, that's again a very important question, and how sort of tokenism or token representation has unfortunately been a part of our politics. You see, it has been almost 75 years of our existence, and for the first time, the issues of marginalized is now getting the space in the mainstream. For the first time in our history, we have someone from the tribal community who will
Yes.
occupy a position of significance, who will become the next constitutional head of the state. And that too, a woman from the tribal community,
Mm.
a woman who had to face multiple hardships in her political life. Why did no one imagine this? There was so much talk about social justice. There was so much talk about diversity and inclusion. But all these years, all these decades, did we see meaningful representation of people from the marginalized section? No. It becomes even more significant because a woman from the tribal community will replace a man from the scheduled caste community at the highest constitutional office of this country. Ramnath Kovindji will be replaced by Draupadi Murmuji, who is a member of the tribal community, a woman from the tribal community. This needs to be said. This needs to be said repeatedly because no one in this country, all these people, all these scholars and the academicians who have been writing tons of literature with respect to social justice, why did this idea not come to them? But at the end of the day, what do we see? It is us. And I can give you 100 such examples. Recently, we saw Rajya Sabha nominations for the first time again in the last 75 years. There was a provision of having members from the field of art and culture. Are you aware that for the first time in the last 75 years, in that quota, a scheduled caste person has come, a Dalit has come, Ilayya Raja from Tamil Nadu, he has been sent to Rajya Sabha in that category. It used to be a club of elites. Rajya Sabha, and when it comes to presidential nominations, it used to be a club of elites. You see, from 1952, when first time it was nominated, until 2022, this idea never occurred in their minds. They will speak about atrocity literature. They will speak about atrocities. Fine, you speak. We are going to have an engagement on this. But at the same time, you are not willing to share representation. You are not willing to share power with them at places where it matters. I am not saying that the fight is over. I am not saying that the struggle is over. The struggle is now getting acknowledged. And like I said, a Rashtrapati Bhavan, Council of Ministers, you look at the Union Council of Ministers, historic level of representation. Again, in the first time in our history, we are seeing 12 members from scheduled caste. We have seen a substantial number of scheduled tribes in the Union Council of Ministers. In the recently Uttar Pradesh cabinet, 3 women from the Dalit community. But why is there absence of discourse on that? Why are no articles being written on this topic? At so many levels, you see. For Padma Award, for instance,
Yeah.
if you do a statistical analysis of Padma Award, you would see today the profiles of Padma awardees, they reflect the social realities. They reflect the social diversity of our country. What did you do? आपने तो बस उसको एक elite का क्लब बना के रख लिया. पद्मा अवार्डी हो, प्रेसिडेंशियल नॉमिनेशंस हो, राष्ट्रपति हो, काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स हो, उत्तर प्रदेश में काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स हो, हर जगह, every places, even in the post-Mandal era of Indian politics. Why did no one thought? किसी के मन में ये विचार नहीं आया क्या? People who are talking about social justice, are they willing to share power? You do a analysis of their organization as well. All the parties, from north to south, from Farooq Abdullah Kashmir to DMK in south, I can give you from Maharashtra, Shiv Sena. We saw what happened to the family-based enterprises now. West Bengal, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, everywhere there is a son, father, daughter, father. You see, if you have capacity, अगर आप में प्रतिभा है, तो आपका राजनीति में emergence होगा. But the fact that you come from one family, the fact that you have one surname, and this is entitled elitism, what we call. Jammu Kashmir National Conference, son and father. PDP, daughter and father. Samajwadi Party, Mulayam Singh Yadav, Akhilesh Yadav. Bihar, Rashtriya Janta Dal, Lalu Yadav, Tejasvi Pratap Yadav. Madhya Pradesh, you see, Maharashtra, you see, Shiv Sena, Uddhav Thackeray, Aditya Thackeray. DMK, you see Stalin, his father, Karunanidhi. Andhra Pradesh, you see, Telangana, you see, KCR. KCR and his son KTR. So the problem is this, that only in the name of tokenism, even in the Congress party, you see, how many leaders from Dalit community did Congress party promote? I'll give you one small incident. Babu Jagjivan Ram, we have written about him in this book. So he came from Dalit community, but he was not given a share in the Congress party. Eventually, he had to leave the Congress party. He played such a phenomenal and a decisive role in 1971 war that led to the creation of Bangladesh as a defense minister. In a book called Blood Telegram, Gary Bass, who used to work at the US consulate in Dhaka, it's a very good book, you must read, on the 1971 war, that Babu Jagjivan Ram is one of the most hawkish defense minister. Henry Kissinger, noted strategic commentator, he has written about Babu Jagjivan Ram. But whenever we talk of 1971, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, fine, you take her name, she was the Prime Minister, but at the same time also acknowledge the role of Babu Jagjivan Ram as a defense minister. The problem is this. But even today, like I say, the struggle for representation, it will continue because institutions like media is one such organization, civil society, think tanks, universities. There are multiple institutions where we need social diversity, where we need that they must reflect the social realities of our country. But the politics of tokenism, especially in the last 8 to 10 years, I think it is now undergoing a fundamental transformation. Now, real representation, meaningful representation at critical decision making places, it has now become a reality.
Okay.
Sorry if I took a lot of
no,
time.
not at all, not at all. That was quite fascinating. It's quite interesting from what I understand. What you've said, there is a level of there's a landmark moment that's occurred, at least more recently, but has been for the last 4, maybe 5 years, or even slightly longer. And there seems to be a shift from the old order of dynastic politics and nepotism within the realm of politics, and now seems to be capturing the essence of what a democracy, or what a representative, what the largest democracy in the world, how it can present an ideal for other democracies in the world, that it's not just about these small pocketed communities that have always perpetuated this tokenism, but there is this wider representation that needs to be accounted for. So no, that's quite fascinating. I have one last question. Now, I have a lot of friends and a lot of people within my network that come from a Dalit background. How can the Indian diaspora across the world understand issues that are happening or that have happened historically? Because we tend to get a very myopic understanding, especially here in the UK. We get a very biased understanding of Dalit history. Yes, Baba Ambedkar comes up, and he's probably the only person that is, again, like you said, there's only one facet of him that's expressed. But how can we better understand this and help solve this gap in our knowledge as diaspora Indians?
Oh, that is a question even I'm struggling with. In a sense, you see, I was in Australia in the first week of June, and I got an opportunity to meet a lot of stakeholders, person from across the communities who are living there. The sort of atmosphere, you see, some institutions they are promoting, it's actually very toxic. See, they are far away from ground, especially when you speak of the US institution and many individuals who now claim to be the sole representative on Dalit issues, like it's an attempt toward misleading them. Like they are not actual representative. They won't tell you that for the first time in our history, a woman from the tribal community is going to become a Rashtrapati. See, these things we must need to say time and again, because it is historical, it is remarkable at so many levels, but only, you see, couple of things I feel on issues of caste and on issues of gender. So, multiple attacks are happening, multiple assaults are happening on these two pretexts, but unfortunately, they are not aware of the realities. You see, in the last 8 years, in the last 8 to 10 years, multiple things have changed. So, the sort of forces, the sort of stakeholders, or the sort of actors, they're invested in keeping a sort of unstable India. In the sense, there are organizations in the US, a small commission, they will sermonize on the issue of religious freedom in India. Who gave them the custodianship? Have they ever visited India? And they are giving lecture to the world that there is an element of sort of fear with respect to religious freedom in India. So they are not the real representative when it comes to the issues of our country, and especially when it comes to caste. So one thing for our diaspora, I think, which they must question whenever there is a discussion or a discourse on Dalit issues, where are the actual Dalits?
Right.
Who gave you the right to speak on behalf of them?
Mm.
So this politics of behalfism
Mm.
in different academic institutions must be questioned. It must be interrogated. We seem to buy everything when it comes to the issue of caste. Agree, there are issues, there are some challenges with respect to caste, but as a culture, as a civilizational nation, we are capable and competent to deal with those challenges.
Mhm.
अब भाई देखा ना अभी, मतलब पहली बार दलित समाज से आदिवासी समाज के लोग राष्ट्रपति बन रहे हैं, highest position in terms of our constitution, but why there is very little literature available on it? No, that is a question which we must need to ask. We have to expose our diaspora to different side of the conversations as well.
Mhm.
But that is unfortunately not happening because of, we know, the established realities that people who are sitting out of these Ivy League institution, how restrictive they are when it comes to issues of our country, when it comes to the issues of caste.
Mm.
For so many years, our diaspora have been out. But how many times did we hear that there is an issue of caste discrimination? Only after this Cisco lawsuit case came from California, people are living there. A maximum number of diaspora in Trinidad, Suriname, they are the head of states.
Mm.
Why are we not talking about them? And we need to understand one thing, that diaspora, when it comes to diaspora, we need to take into account the diaspora of South America as well, diaspora of Australia as well, not only the diaspora of US and UK.
Yeah.
We are very restrictive when it comes to the issues of diaspora.
Yeah, I can understand.
Our people in New Zealand, अभी देखा मैंने, एक महिला मंत्री बन रही है वहां पे. So point is this. So even in our sense, in our perspective also, we see that the issues of diaspora are only restricted to issues of US diaspora, और कभी कभी वो UK का diaspora लेते हैं. That is not the case.
Mm.
Entire world,
Mm.
we are at positions of significance in so many countries now. So point is not that, but one small thing for our diaspora, that you need to question that on whose behalf you are claiming to speak. Where are the actual stakeholders?
Hmm.
What are the real issues? Can I know the different side of story as well? So I think these stories, but this is still a work in progress. That how do we actually deal with these issues for our diaspora? Generating more and more literature, generating more and more of this conversation sort of a thing, which would come out and be for posterity on social media, like pushing the right narrative, asking the right questions, being more sort of interrogative when it comes to Dalit issues and other gender issues as well, will probably help this cause.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think asking the right questions is really important, because it's unless you're asking the right questions, you're forever going to be circling around the same literature, and it becomes an echo chamber more than anything else. So, but thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Milenge.
Namaste.
Namaste.